Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and tonight I'm going to get along very well with some friends of mine who are in the Philippines and in Australia, respectively. So if it looks dark here, it's because it is night for me, but it's sure morning or something for those folks. So I'm looking forward to this conversation with two guys I've got to know through this wonderful organization that I've been. And Dennis Garrity is our main. We're going to gang up on Dennis and ask him all kinds of wonderful questions about his wonderful work. Dennis Garrity is a systems agronomist. That's what Google told me you are. I'm not sure I would have figured that out from anything else, but he's a researcher, and he lives in the Philippines, and his whole career has been devoted to the development of small-scale farming systems in the tropics. And he's been telling me about um, what kind of beautiful weather they're having there, just as I'm having freezing rain here in Toronto. But before we get started, I've got to have I have a thrill for everybody. Robbie Tulip has had behind him, leaning against the wall, a very funny looking gadget, which I asked about, and he brought forth and showed me a musical. Is it called a musical instrument?
Yes.
It makes sounds anyway. I don't know whether you call it music, but
Okay.
but at any rate, get it, Robbie. I want you to perform
It's called
with your.
a didgeridoo, and it's an Indigenous Australian instrument. The way it's made is that it's hardwood from the tropics in Arnhem Land in northern Australia, and um, with with a tree, the termites grow up through the middle of the tree and they hollow it out, and so
What?
the
The termites, did you say?
that's right, yes. So termites hollow out the tree, and then you mix beeswax together with charcoal to make the embouchure, the mouthpiece, and then blow into the didgeridoo,
Now,
and it's
how long is that thing? I can't tell exactly.
it's about 5 feet.
Okay, and it's totally hollow.
Yes,
Okay, all
yes.
right, let's hear it.
And so
You sort of blow with little bursts of air. Is that it?
well, it's a method called circular breathing, so that you're able to maintain a continuous sound and breathe in while you're maintaining the sound. So yeah, it's like a bit like a trombone, but without a slide,
Huh, okay.
and made of wood. I
Is
love it.
it used for some kind of rituals or do what?
It's a very religious instrument. It's a very spiritual instrument. It's
Really?
deeply connected to the earth, and with Australia's Indigenous culture, 60,000 years old. It's one of the oldest cultures on earth, and the didgeridoo has been a key religious ceremonial instrument for Australian Aboriginal people.
Ah, wow. Okay. Well, thank you. I think this is my first experience hearing one, and my life has changed permanently. I'm sure. This wonderful experience. And how did you get it? Yeah, I bet you can't just go up and down the street finding shops selling didgeridoos.
Oh yes, they're quite popular for tourists,
Oh, really?
and they've it's become people around the world learn to play the didgeridoo because it creates a really unique resonance,
Uh-huh.
which people love it, and it works really well as a sort of bass instrument with musical performance. But yeah, I've had this one since I was a kid. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I tried to find out from my mum where it came from, but we
Uh,
couldn't work it out.
uh, well, thank you. Okay, let's gang up on Dennis here and find out more about his work. I'm very pleased to know that you're into agriculture, and that you were brought up in Cleveland and then went away to study agriculture when you were 18, and so you've been an agronomist ever since. Is that the technical word for agriculturist, or does it mean scholars who study agriculture?
Oh, well, Meta, an agronomist is one particular type of agriculturist. Yeah. Agronomists are focused on the production of crops and the health of soils. So then you have livestock people, you have many other segments of agriculture, but agronomy is about crops and soils.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's good to know. All right, so what is it that you have been doing all these years, helping people learn how to use better farming techniques and how to improve the quality of the soil in the tropics? Hmm?
Well, I had a very, very interesting epiphany when I was in high school, and that has driven my career ever since I was about 17 years old.
Hmm.
Um, I was always interested in farming, and I worked with my grandfather on our family dairy farm, and I was interested in science, but I never saw the two coming together. Farming and science seemed to be something
Hmm.
distinct. But then I was introduced to a magazine article and a book when I was doing a term paper in high school that absolutely riveted my interests and attention. And that was a book called Famine 1975,
Oh.
and was written by two agronomists who were trying to come to grips with the fact that in Asia, in particular, population and demand for food was growing much faster than food supply. And there were many countries,
Hmm.
particularly India, but also China, the Philippines, Indonesia, that were deficit in food supply. They could not produce enough food, and the situation was getting worse year by year. Now, this was back in the late 1960s, and the agronomists analyzed what could be done about this. Well, at about this time, there was an investment in agricultural research in the tropics that revolutionized food production, what we call the Green Revolution. And as I began to be aware of the Green Revolution and the potential for science in agriculture, I was absolutely overwhelmed by the opportunity. And so I studied agriculture at Ohio State University, spent a year at an agricultural university in India when I was a sophomore in college, backpacked throughout the entire region for 6 months on my way home from India, visited farming systems all over the region, and stopped at the International Rice Research Institute, which was the mother of the Green Revolution in rice. They had recently developed varieties that had tripled the yield potential of rice in the region. And I was just excited beyond measure. And so I wangled an opportunity to come back to the Rice Research Institute
Where was
to
that?
where?
Rice Institute.
Oh, the Rice Research Institute is located right next door to where I currently live in
Oh,
the Philippines. Yeah.
oh, okay.
It was started by the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations and supported by the US government. And it was a stellar example of how agricultural research can solve problems for masses of people. And within a decade, countries like India, the Philippines, and others that were extremely food deficient and having to import large amounts of food, much of it donated by the United States at that time, were able to become self-sufficient in food production and could now begin to export food and diversify their agriculture. So I went on to a career in international agricultural development, working here at the Rice Institute in the Philippines, working in Indonesia for 10 years, working in India, and then 21 years in Africa, where I led the World Agroforestry Center, which is all about combining trees and crops and livestock into farming systems.
Now that's I'd love to explore. I love the idea.
Yeah, a fascinating field of agriculture.
Now, where was that? Where were you there in India?
In Nairobi, Kenya.
Right.
The headquarters, the world headquarters for the World Agroforestry Center. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm retired now, but I continue to be very actively engaged in these areas, particularly through founding a new organization called the Global Evergreening Alliance a number of years ago, which is focused on working with hundreds of thousands of smallholder farmers in Africa and Asia to restore the quality, the health of their land through agroforestry. We have major programs that are working literally with hundreds of thousands of farmers, individual families, and that has been continuing to be a very satisfying area of my work. Is helping to lead the efforts of that organization.
Okay,
I first met Dennis when I was working at AusAid, the Australian Agency for International Development, in the agriculture program, and he was able to visit us in Canberra. And it was just, I remember the meeting quite vividly because Dennis's understanding of trees and their relationship to agriculture just opens up such insight about how poor communities can develop. It's a very profound path out of poverty for many poor countries and for environmental repair. He was just mentioning the Green Revolution, and a couple of years ago I read this book called The Wizard and the Prophet by Charles Mann, and the wizard is a man called Norman Borlaug, who Dennis may even have met, I imagine.
And, yes.
But isn't he the guy that is kind of credited for being the founder of the Green Revolution?
Yes,
and so the prophet is a fellow by the name of William Vogt, who was responsible for protecting the sequoia trees of California, and did a great deal to establish the environmental movement in the 1940s in the USA. And so, two great leaders of the last century who in their own way, who combined in this analysis to represent, I suppose, two poles of what's needed in terms of vision and science to fix the world and improve people's lives. And so the whole scene of international agricultural research. There's a group called the Consultative Group for International Agricultural Research, which all of these bodies that Dennis has mentioned come together in CGIAR. And I was involved with the Australian side of it, with the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. And the whole analysis of the cost benefit of this sort of work it's just really profound. And so it's quite disappointing that the United States has recently pulled back from international development. As Dennis mentioned, the role of the USA in establishing IRRI in Manila, in the Philippines, has just had such enormous benefit in overcoming poverty in the world. And so the sort of polarization that we've got that's allowed this sort of falling away, not just from international development, but also from understanding of climate, which is now where Dennis and I are focusing our attention.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, let me start with the question that I think occurs let me make a guess of what it's about. I guess most of us think, well, if you've got some land, you could plant an orchard or you could plant crops, but you can't do both.
Mm.
And then I see some people saying, well, yeah, you can sometimes find crops that you can grow under trees in the shade, like I think coffee, and I don't know what else. But now is your project to try to encourage people to find ways of doing both at the same time, or is that just a kind of a side effect of what you're really trying to do?
Well, actually, Meta, you can, particularly in the tropics, grow trees and crops side by side and associated with each other quite intimately because you have sunlight and often moisture all year round. And unlike in the temperate zone, where you have a short growing season, like Toronto, your growing season's only about 5 months of the year. The crops that are planted need to grow very rapidly, and they will suffer from shading if you plant them next to a tree. But in the tropics, it's a whole different situation. And farmers have practiced agroforestry, associating trees with crops in the tropics for many, many generations, hundreds or thousands of years. It's a practice that is well understood in the tropics. And
Mhm.
that's where agroforestry has its greatest potential. But there are also synergies in any environment. If your selection of your crops and your trees is well based, so that the total production of both the crops and the trees is higher than the production would be of either commodity if it were planted in monoculture. You
Wow.
see, it's
Uh-huh.
what we call the land equivalent ratio.
Mhm.
Um, you can mix and match your crops and trees so that your total production is higher than either the trees or the crops would produce on their own. And that's the key component of success in agroforestry. But it does take a bit of art as well as science to practice to get these additional benefits. But as I say, farmers in the tropics are well familiar with it.
Robbie, how did your work intersect with his?
Well, the issue is that what Dennis came to understand was that all of the work that's being done to improve agricultural productivity will come to nothing if the world overheats. And so that's been, I think, an insight that we've shared within the Healthy Planet Action Coalition. And so Dennis was able to join us in HPAC and bring his great insights and organisational skills as the head of the World Agroforestry Union and the Evergreening Alliance to help us consider understanding the climate situation in an integrated way, and that's been a great value. So Dennis was able to organise a very successful online global conference in association with the uh, uh, Conference of the Parties on climate change, about asking what's the plan for the global heating emergency. And so working with Dennis on those themes, it's led to questions like what's the role of poor countries in understanding practical ways to reverse climate change, and given that countries like the USA have fallen away from science, and but that there's a great deal of human suffering coming from global warming, that just working out what we can do, how we can reach out to partners, and especially this concept of a first mover alliance of primarily developing countries who are worst affected by global warming. So
That
this
be
is
a first mover alliance. The term is an interesting one, but I can't quite guess what it might be.
Dennis might like to expand on that.
Sure,
Mm.
sure. Well, actually, Meta, As the Healthy Planet Action Coalition began to expand its global activities, we were very concerned about how to develop champions, countries, and individuals to support a new and much more comprehensive approach to dealing with the climate change situation. As you know, the traditional way in which the global community has approached the problem is to try to reduce emissions so that the blanket of greenhouse gases can actually be controlled so that temperatures do not continue to increase and get out of control.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that that is an extremely difficult thing to do. Our energy systems are dominated by fossil fuels, which emit enormous amounts of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere every year. And trying to slow down and reverse that process has proven to be very, very challenging. Fortunately, alternative sources of renewable energy are now making major headroads into this problem. The expansion of solar panel electricity, wind power, nuclear power, hydropower, and other renewable energy sources are gaining ground. But the demand for electricity is increasing so fast that the proportion of our global electricity produced by fossil fuels is not actually declining very much, even though we're rapidly expanding the renewable energies. And so,
is it really declining at all? I have the impression that it hasn't even dropped off, but it's just leveled off, that it's not increasing as fast as it was, but it's still not.
I think the percentage has fallen by it's sitting around the 80% mark of energy is from fossil fuels, and that's fallen by 1 or 2%, but not materially.
Yeah. But Meta is probably referring to the amount of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere every year.
Yes,
and that's still increasing. That's still increasing. So we have not turned the corner on that problem. And
well, the rate of increase is accelerating. It's not only that that it's not going down; it's actually going up. And with all of the new demand for electricity and energy, there's immense demand, and so very difficult to cut emissions.
Yeah. And so our organization, the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, has been fostering a process to champion adding a new tool to the toolbox that can give us rapid short-term alleviation of the temperature increase, stopping the rise of temperature in the short term so that we can, in the long term, reduce emissions and remove CO2 and methane from the atmosphere. Because we know now that no matter
but when you say a method, or it's a whole bunch of methods, isn't it?
These are called sunlight reflection methods or climate direct intervention methods. And there's about 15 of these methods that we've analyzed. Although there's only 1 or 2 that have the potential to rapidly be scaled up in the short term, in the very near future. So we are working to increase the awareness of the general public, but particularly policymakers in countries around the world, to champion a new comprehensive climate plan that would include all 3 of the key tools together, combined. That is emissions reduction, removal of greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, and sunlight reflection methods to slightly reduce the amount of sunlight which is absorbed by the planet and therefore help to cool it down in the short run. We believe that we must stop the temperature increase immediately and revert back to a temperature that is safe for humanity and the planet, which would be under 1 degree of temperature rise above pre-industrial levels. But currently, we're already at 1.5, and we are experiencing the approach or the arrival of tipping points that are irreversible and could send the temperatures of the Earth into a spiral of increasing heating over the coming decades. And then we lose control completely of our ability to deal with the problem. So we need all three tools.
Yeah.
And Robert is currently writing a book about this topic and emphasizing the critical importance of a global agreement to increase the albedo of the Earth by reducing the amount of solar radiation that we absorb every year. This is now an extremely important issue for the global community.
Mm-hmm.
And yet very few people understand.
Exactly. Well, I try to talk to my friends about it, and they go blank. They never heard of that before. And I guess one of the questions is, why isn't it up there right front and center? Because
Well, Robert will tell you that this has been a very controversial topic.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing here is actually engineering the climate of the planet to reverse the effects of the previous engineering that has been destroying the climate of the planet. So we're trying to become stewards of the planet in a way that has never been conceived before. And this, unfortunately, scares people. They think, humans are playing God to try to, on a global basis, reduce sunlight absorbed by the Earth, doing things like the spraying of aerosols into the upper stratosphere, which would reflect particles, reflect light through the aerosol particles, and you can then turn down the thermostat gradually to a level of safety that we need to approach. But it has seemed very dangerous to many people to consider such an idea, although we know scientifically that it works and it is basically safe to apply, because we have the grand example of a volcano right here in the Philippines that was a natural experiment that showed that.
Is that where the Pinatubo is? I never knew where it was. Is that the Philippines?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's just about 150 miles north of where I live in the Philippines. Yeah.
Were you in the Philippines when the eruption happened back in 1991, 92?
Yeah. I was almost, I almost lost my life during that experience. I was too close to the volcano at that time.
Really?
Yeah, it was kind of scary. I was traveling up to my wife's hometown, which is only about 30 miles from the volcano, when we got stuck because the ash of the volcano was coming down like Pompeii, right? And burying the towns and the roads and everything. And I was afraid we were never going to get out of there. We were going to get buried alive. Yeah. We managed to escape and to get out of the danger zone, but that was an interesting experience.
I gotcha. Yeah.
If I could come back to Metta's question about why is it that when she tries to speak to people about climate, they look at her with blank looks. And one of the ways that I try to understand it is that we've got this really strong polarization in the public discussion about climate change. Like, on the one hand, there are people who are saying that if only we decarbonised the economy really fast, then we'd be able to fix the problem. And then on the other side, there are people who just deny that it's a problem at all. And so you've got this division. And the trouble is that the sort of line that we're putting is that both of those arguments have got really significant scientific weaknesses. And so, but what happens is that when the people who believe either that climate change is not real or that we can fix climate change just by cutting emissions, when they look at what we're saying about sunlight reflection, they seem to automatically think that we're on the other side from them. So, like, people say that solar geoengineering is is something that's promoted by the fossil fuel industry, when in reality the fossil fuel industry just has had nothing to do with the whole debate. And then people who are part of the fossil economy, they look at the advocacy for sunlight reflection and they say, oh, that's just all part of the climate scam. So you've got this difficulty of getting the sort of simple, clear understanding of the situation, which I think Dennis is a great leader in presenting, into the mainstream media. And so having this sort of conversation with you, it's helping to change the popular understanding. And like it would be great if this sort of understanding could be published and debated in politics and the media. But at the moment, we're just really on the margins. You know, the sort of understanding, like I mentioned before, that you know, the international agricultural research community need to understand that heat is just a basic constraint for agricultural productivity, and that unless we do something about heat, then all of the research that they've been doing faces great risk of failure and famine. So those are, I think that as I understood from Dennis's earlier conversations, that was something that really inspired him to get into this problem of sunlight reflection as a way of fixing the growing heat. And
well, you know, but there's another angle to it, because now when I have mentioned this to people, one of the other critiques that I hear is my friends say, you want to blot out the sun, but you're going to kill agriculture because the plants need the sun, and you go around and interfering, and you're going to, our food production will go down. So you're saying it's the opposite.
Absolutely.
That the heat is what's killing agriculture. Yeah. Is that fair also, Dennis? Because you're the agriculture expert on this. Which was it?
Two things, Meta. One is that the amount of sunlight which we're talking of reducing is extremely small. It's less than 1% of the sun that's reaching the earth. So it has absolutely no negative effects on agricultural production. Actually, we believe that it will increase agricultural production because the refraction of the light as it bounces around among the particles that are put up in the stratosphere will actually improve the efficiency of plants to capture light and photosynthesize. So it actually would have a positive effect. And there are a number of excellent papers that have examined this and have shown that food production, major crops, is very likely to increase substantially if we use sunlight reflection methods carefully. So that's not a problem. We also have, you know, the actual effects of climate change if we do nothing, or we fail to be able to reduce emissions, and that is very dire. As Robert mentioned, the food production is going to be drastically affected over the next 50 years when temperatures reach levels that are unhealthy for crops and crop yields decline drastically.
Is that
And
happening at all yet? Or is it here and there?
It's not happening significantly yet, or at least we haven't been able to measure drops in agricultural production yet. That's
There is
because
some association between climate change and drought, but
oh yeah,
that's
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
so
that's right.
like the whole disruption of climate and the rise of extreme weather is another major factor. So a lot of countries have faced uh, storms and floods and fires and droughts that are significantly exacerbated by heat, by global warming.
Yes, yes, there have been many events which have reduced production. But what we're worried about, and what the agricultural research community is beginning to get concerned about, is a cascade of these events of heat domes and droughts and floods occurring simultaneously in different parts of the world, which will dramatically reduce food production in a given year and spike food prices, which would have enormous negative effects on the poor, who are spending a large proportion of their income on food. And so these
So
type
some
of
two of the other big problems are pests that seeing things like the forests of North America being uh, uh, dying as a result of beetles that can survive with the warmer weather but previously couldn't survive. And another one is that in the tropics, when the temperature gets above 40 degrees, it's very difficult to work in the fields through the day. And so there's just lots of parts of the world where it's just becoming much more difficult. And then we've got the risk of sea level rise, which it could just emerge much more rapidly than people expect.
Hmm.
there are
Hey,
many, many.
let me go off track a little bit because you know what you're saying is ways of improving or at least sustaining the productivity of agriculture. But I hear other people talk about innovations that are of a different nature. Some people will talk about more about things like indoor agriculture, growing crops in or food production in big glass buildings and so on, or using fake meat, in vats so that they produce that, which would reduce the amount of pasture necessary if you got rid of all the cows, the cattle, and therefore you could either use it for more food or you could actually let it go wild again, and as in before the industrial period. Some of these alternatives, are there other, oh, and things like, I was reading about some guy who talks about the production of some kind of milk from air and water and yeast or something, and you can make tremendous amounts of protein that way. Are there, in other words, are there various alternatives to agriculture that will make it more reasonable to expect we can take the edge off the risk?
Absolutely, absolutely, Meta. I've been studying the alternative meats and the artificial production of proteins for a number of years, and I believe that it has a major role to play in the future to enable us to diversify our protein sources and to reduce the pressure that is exerted by the annual increase in the ruminant populations, the animals in the world, which is producing so much methane that it's causing a tremendous pressure on
So
temperature.
ruminants are cattle.
Cattle, sheep, goats, camels, all of these ruminant animals their populations continue to increase because the demand for meat keeps going up at a very rapid rate, particularly in the developing countries. And so alternative protein sources are a safe and effective way of producing the meat proteins that we will need in the future. And I believe this is an important role for this industry as it develops.
It's an order of magnitude problem, which is that the impact of this sort of change of diet on heat is relatively small and slow compared to the impact of stratospheric aerosol injection, and so that's but we've got this sort of planetary fever that we've got to cool down quite quickly, and we can address these sort of longer term sustainable issues of agricultural crops and meat and so on. Like as Dennis said, there's high demand for meat, and so quite challenging to get everybody to go vegetarian. But even if we did increase vegetarianism, that doesn't really have a quick impact on the planetary heat and the tipping points. And this is where we can come back to this first mover alliance question, that we need to analyze all of the different contributions and say, what is the most important? What's the best value for money? What's the quickest response that we can have? Who is going to champion it? And this is where a country like India, for example, might be really good. Switzerland and Monaco went to the United Nations Environment Programme and called for research into these technologies, and they were rebuffed, including by Africa. So there's been a lot of disinformation around this whole space, and so we need to build our constituencies of support, just build the conversation, get the funding to get this debate into the mainstream media, and get countries who are most severely affected to better understand and advocate for cooling.
That's right.
Back up a little, because I'm not. Switzerland went where and promoted what idea?
So for some years, the United Nations Environment Programme has had its world conferences in Nairobi, I believe, and twice Switzerland, together with a couple of other countries, smaller countries like Monaco, has asked the UNEP to conduct a research study of the possible benefits of cooling by sunlight reflection. And because the dominant thinking in the United Nations is that the main agenda is to shut down the fossil fuel industries. So like they've said, we should halve the world use of fossil fuels by 2030. That was one of the main arguments from the last integrated assessment report. So they say we need to shut down fossil fuels. So if we just research sunlight reflection, then that will undermine the momentum for attacking and defeating the fossil fuel industry. So it's a complete pipe dream. It's a nonsensical argument, but it's the one that rules in the United Nations.
Okay, but you guys are focusing entirely on sunlight reflection. Excuse me.
Not totally.
Because I think there's. I've made a list of about 30 different technologies or proposals that would each contribute something, probably. And if we did, half of them or a quarter of them, it would make a big impact. But why is it we only talk about albedo, which I do not want to detract from that. I quite agree that's the most important thing we could be doing, but at the moment. But there's more too as well, and it's not just SAR.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have had an enormous amount of research on all of these different methods. I mentioned there's about 15 in our recent Healthy Planet analysis of these methods. And different methods come with different costs and different implications. And clearly the consensus is that if you want to actually deal with this problem within the next 2 or 3 decades, which is the critical window to try to avert tipping points that would be just absolutely disastrous, there are only a very, very small number of techniques that can be scaled up to the level in which they could have impact. So you got 15 or so methods. Most of them we are very interested in, and we have members of Healthy Planet that are working on all of these different methods, and they all can be scaled up eventually, but that will take time and enormous amounts of capital. Whereas stratospheric aerosol injection, which is providing this veil of aerosol particles, which Mount Pinatubo showed us can be done successfully, is actually quite inexpensive and quite technically doable. And we know that the side effects are very minimal from this method. Mm-hmm. So this is the method that the consensus has been focusing on because it is the most practical way of actually dealing with the problem of short-term averting temperature uncontrollable increase, you see.
But my sense is that it's the least popular, that there's more objection to that than to any other approach, and therefore it's the least likely to be accepted.
Well, currently you are correct. It is the least popular method because it is the most unusual scientific solution to the problem. Mm-hmm. We believe that the whole issue relies on an understanding of how urgent the global heating situation actually is. And when we talk with people who are diametrically opposed to the idea of stratospheric aerosol injection, and they begin to realize how extremely urgent action is required, they change their minds. And I could give you many examples So we are now developing a global dialogue along with a number of affiliated organizations to get policymakers and policy influencers talking about what the stratospheric aerosol injection and marine cloud brightening methods can contribute to the short-term averting of a uncontrollable temperature. Mm-hmm. And that debate it's really become a very big deal in the last year or two. There's been an enormous increase in awareness about the problem and awareness about these solutions. And we believe that the key is the development now of a global governance system among countries to call for the development of a serious scientific plan to combine these three tools into a comprehensive approach. And fortunately, there are countries that are now seriously considering these opportunities. Iceland, for example, is leading the Nordic countries in its realization that the slowing down and collapse of the North Atlantic current would be absolutely disastrous to the future of Iceland. And they are now doing national security analyses and calling for serious consideration of these methods to actually control the temperature. The Nordic countries are now in the lead, and we see them as being very influential in a foundation for this first movers coalition that Robert mentioned. Also, India. We are working with our affiliated organization in India to sponsor and convene a political summit on climate interventions in August of this year. And that will be informed by a new study that's being done by the Indian Planning Commission, very high-level body, to study the implications of climate urgency and the effects and impacts on India, and what are the solutions, particularly stratospheric aerosol injection. So India may be a first mover in the near future. And we're working with a number of other countries to develop their national capabilities to analyze the problem from their own perspective so that they understand the security and risks that occur to them as countries. And when they do that, there is very little doubt in my mind that they will come to the conclusion that we simply cannot go on doing things the way we were doing them through the UN Climate Change Convention. We have to integrate sunlight reflection methods into the body of solutions that we need to tackle the problem.
Okay, I'm all for that. And let me tell you about something that I'm doing that relates, which is just today I sent out a Substack invitation to, I don't know, 9,000 computers or so worldwide, telling people that we will be hosting some working groups or study groups in the future, which will just meet quarterly, but of people who are interested in between. They're following developments in various global threats, war and weapons, etc., but clearly involving global warming, one of them. We'll have 5 different study groups. And I'm thinking, we're talking about ways of getting the conversation to be spread into the general population. So this is the idea of inviting anybody. For the first one, we're inviting the whole world if they want to come and participate in kind of an open house, town hall kind of meeting. But gradually, we'll continue to discuss climate. So I hope that some of the people from the HPAC will join in these and influence the tenor of the conversation, participate in these and help bring information about albedo into the dialogue. So I'm going to...
Yeah, I've had some great conversations with you, Meta, on the global town halls, just engaging with people who've got, serious, sensible questions about the sort of thinking that Dennis and I are advocating. And it's been great because I think there's a lot of disinformation out there. And people criticize, of course, the fossil fuel industry for disinformation. But I think equally there's disinformation coming from the environmental NGOs with their opposition to stratospheric aerosol injection, because people have created a whole lot of fear, which is just not justified. Because what's needed is a sensible, scientific, well-governed international program to test the safety and the efficacy of all of the different technologies, and in much the same way that the pharmaceutical industry tests the safety and efficacy of new drugs before they come onto market. And so it's entirely possible with SAI, which is to my mind is clearly the single most important and immediate option to remove the dangerous heat that we've currently got. It can start small, and it can be tested in ways that prove its safety. And I'm quite convinced that the benefits just far, far outweigh the risks. And so people have been misinformed about this topic. Like even something like the ozone impact. The scientists say that the criticisms around that have been blown out of all proportion. But that's something that we need to find out from properly constructed field tests, not just by speculation and political argument.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've come to the end of our time and then some, but it is such an important topic that I'm delighted that we've come here, and we're going to go over it again and again in different iterations. Okay, so thank you guys.
I have one quick message,
Sure.
kind of sum up our work today. And that is that, a recent survey has indicated that 50% of young people globally have come to the conclusion that humanity is doomed. And of course, this is a very, very alarming situation because, of course, when you come to that conclusion, you give up. You don't engage in solving a problem that you think is unsolvable.
You don't want to have children.
But we know that the problem is still solvable in very practical ways. But we have to think outside the box of our current climate change structure in the Climate Change Convention, or we will end up being doomed. That's the thing. So we are confident that we can actually deal with and cope with this problem by thinking outside the box and mobilizing countries to engage in the dialogue and the analysis to come up with this first movers coalition that can lead the world to a comprehensive approach to solutions. So I would end on a positive tone that scientists know that we can solve this problem, but we have to be more unconventional in the way we think about the nature of the problem and the solutions that we will apply. And that was what happened in the Green Revolution. Before the Green Revolution, no one imagined that you could revolutionize agriculture within a couple of decades. Nobody. This book, Famine 1975, I mentioned, did not imagine that could happen. And while the book was being published, the revolution was underway. And as I mentioned, it so successfully solved the problem that your listeners, hardly any of them, worry about food availability, but that was a massive worry in the 1960s and 1970s. The time will come after we solve this problem that we will look back and be grateful for the heroic work of scientists that have come up with the solutions that can practically solve the global heating emergency.
And you're part of the leaders, so thank you for doing it. It's wonderful. We'll be seeing more of each other, I'm sure. Okay?
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for having me.